Hi everyone, welcome back to the Flix Files, and it's my Halloween special, my first Halloween special. I love Halloween. I've always liked Halloween. And the only thing about Halloween that I find a bit sad is that it's a reminder that Christmas is getting nearer. And if anybody's watched any of my older videos, they'll know by now that I'm not a big fan of Christmas. I'm 54. So I've had 53 Christmases up till now. And I used to love Christmases when I was a kid. And Christmas is for children. And I don't have any children. So by the time I reached the age of about 14, I started to see the commerciality of it and started to get jaded with it. And every year that's passed, it just got worse. So now I really despise it. But I love Halloween. I love the scary nature of Halloween. And I live in the United Kingdom, and United Kingdom aren't that brilliant at celebrating Halloween. We're trying to follow the Americans' example, but the Americans are so brilliant at this that they just make our attempts look really feeble. We're getting better at it as a country, I think. But when I see some of the videos of what the Americans do for decorating the front of their houses and the costumes that they wear, they're just on another level. And we are still very much amateurs. So yeah, I thought I'll do a Halloween special. And other than doing a video a little while ago that was kind of a tag response to do with horror all-nighters, if anybody hasn't seen that video, just pop and have a look at it, where I was picking 4 videos that I would watch at a cinema, 4 horror films, should I say. And I did, I picked 4 horror films. And as it got closer to Halloween, I thought, I really ought to just do another video about horror films, because I know a few of my subscribers are big horror fans and that's like their main genre. Like mine's science fiction. Theirs is horror. And I thought, well, I do have some horror films in my collection. I've not got a massive amount, but I've kind of picked out my favorites of the ones I have on physical media. So I thought for a Halloween special, I'd talk about those. And also talk about a thing called video nasties. Now, anybody that grew up in the United Kingdom in the 80s will know what I mean by video nasties. But I'll just give you a quick potted history for those of you overseas or maybe a bit younger and you weren't aware of this.
The Home Secretary, Michael Howard, has said he will look closely at a report which says there is a link between violent videos and crime. But he said it would be an extreme step to ban the videos simply on the grounds that they were unsuitable for youngsters. More than 200 MPs say he should.
But I need to take you back to the heady days of the 1970s. I grew up in the 1970s. I was born in 1970. And my memory of growing up in the 1970s is very beige. And I don't remember much excitement occurring when I was, before the age of 10. And home entertainment at that point consisted of watching the television and whatever was on that night, playing board games. I think of things like Kaplunk and Buckaroo and Mousetrap, and getting those laid out on the kitchen table. And just games at Christmas like charades comes to mind. And that was kind of it for home entertainment, apart from like having a Grundig music centre and spinning some vinyls. But towards the end of the 70s, the tide started to turn and we started to get the first kind of arcade machines in the home with the Atari VCS game console, which was like incredible to have as a child. I mean, even though the graphics on it were absolutely shocking, to be able to control things on the screen using a little joystick that you could hold was just incredible. And I've never really gotten over that, and I'm a massive video game nerd. And I could easily make loads of videos about that. I could do another channel just about PC gaming and emulation and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that was a lovely thing to have happen in the late 70s, and to be able to use the television for something else other than watching Emmerdale Farm and Benny Hill. And then video recorders came around. My cat's just walked in. And then video recorders came around. Now, they were a monumental leap in home entertainment. And I can remember the first video recorder that we ever got, and it was a Betamax. And we got it in 1981. Huge thing. Must have weighed about 20 kilos. And it had them huge sort of piano push-down buttons on the front. And there was no remote control. I think that the first video we had with a remote control, like Peter Kay, the comedian, says, was on a wire. And certainly the very first one we ever had, the Betamax video recorder, a Sanyo, I seem to think it was, that had massive buttons on it. And you would eject the tray to put a cassette in, and it would go, and the whole room would vibrate. And that was just an incredible device. To think that we could then record things off the television, films, TV programs, and watch them back as many times as we wanted. It was incredible.
I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. With Scotch's lifetime guarantee. Take what you want both night and day. Then re-record, not fade away. Re-record, not fade away. Re-record,
if it's Scotch, it's guaranteed.
And of course, this brought on the advent of local video shops. Now, you've got to think this is 1981. This is way before Blockbuster. And back then, you would have a little independent shop, you know, like a post office or a sweet shop. And they would have a collection of videotapes that you could go and peruse and rent them out. And when we got our first video recorder, my father, bless him, he said, let's go and get 2 films out for our first foray into the world of home video media. And I can recall us going down to the video shop and looking at the films that they had, and they didn't have them in any category. They were just all thrown up on a wall on shelves, and you had to spend time looking through them. And it was lovely. It was a lovely thing to go and do. And the point I'm getting at is that this was an age before the term video nasties came about. So what happened was, in the early days of home video, companies could release movies of X-rated or beyond X-rated, really graphic, artificial, you know, we're not talking snuff movies here, but X-rated horror movies. And they could release them and sort of circumvent the British Board of Film Classification. So we ended up with a lot of really hardcore horror movies on the shelf that you could rent out. And I can remember on our first visit that my dad picked the movie Convoy with Chris Christopherson, bless him, who sadly passed away fairly recently. And I have that on Blu-ray. I think it's a great film. So that was his choice. And then he said to me, as an 11-year-old, right, you can pick any movie that you want to watch. And I was looking for Alien, because even then I knew of the film Alien, having seen articles about it in Starlog, and I was desperate to watch it. But they had a copy, but it had been rented out by somebody else. Oh, can you believe it? So I had to pick something different. And I picked, as my first rental as an 11-year-old, the film Zombie Flesh Eaters, directed by Lucio Fulci. Now, my dad, bless him, could have said, no, you're not having that. You're only 11. It'll affect you. But he didn't. He just let me pick it. And that was the movie that I took home to watch. So we watched a comedy road action movie with Chris Christopherson that was a laugh. And then we ejected that and I put on Zombie Flesh Eaters, with people getting eaten alive and big wooden splinters shoved into people's eyeballs and all sorts going on. And it was scary because it was the first time I'd seen makeup effects of that level before. But even as an 11-year-old, I knew it was only a movie. And even some of the things I was seeing, I couldn't quite understand how they did it. I knew it wasn't real. So it didn't really affect me. I didn't come away from watching that movie and have hideous nightmares for the next 3 months. And yeah, me personally, and my experience of watching video nasties in my early teens, it didn't really have any effect on me. So where did the term video nasties come from? Well, there was a point where the Conservative government that were in power at the time started to take notice of these violent films, and they attributed it to certain acts of violence that may have been occurring in the country.
MPs demanding a change in the law have had their resolve to get it strengthened. Many are Conservative. In their way is the fine print. How do you write legislation that stops certain violent videos reaching the shops while leaving others, including Oscar winners, unaffected?
And they just assumed that if people watched violence of that nature on their televisions, they would go out and do similar things, which is of course nonsense. I never agreed with the fact that violent movies can make people violent. Now, there is a little proviso to that. If someone has some kind of a mental disorder, whether it's undiagnosed or diagnosed, there's a chance that they could watch a very violent movie and it would put something in their brain that would make them want to act that violence out. But that could be brought on by anything if somebody was that way inclined. They could read a book that would give them that idea. They could look at a comic book. They could play a video game. So pinning it all on movies, I think, is farcical. And I've never been a stalwart of saying that violence in films is terrible. It's nonsense. It didn't affect me. I'm a very grounded person. I grew up watching horror films and very bad video nasties. And I'm here to say that I'm a nicely grounded person. I've never broken any laws. I've worked in education for most of my life. So yeah, I just don't, I think the idea of violent films affecting people in that way on such a broad scope is just nonsense.
We do not accept that there is a conclusive argument that the problems in our society can be simply cured by preventing the majority of households in the United Kingdom from being able to see 15 and 18 classified programmes.
So yeah, video nasties was coined because there was a lady in England whose name instills fear on people that remember it. And her name was Mary Whitehouse. And she was kind of a stuffy older lady who didn't like the idea of these kind of things being made available to the public.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mary Whitehouse speaking. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say to you that your children and your families are very much at risk, particularly at this time, from video nasties, from media violence, from pornography, and even, could be, from cable television.
So immediately I find this a very bitter pill to swallow because I don't like censorship in any form. I like to think that I can choose what I can watch, and I don't like people doing it for me. That's why I never watch movies that are on terrestrial television, because inevitably they will have swearing removed or scenes of violence removed. And I hate that. I really hate that. I like to watch a movie as the director intended it to be. So that's why I stick to physical media. Even some streaming services have been known to do it. So I steer well clear of watching. If it's a film that I really like, then I'll have it on physical media, if it's available. There are some that I like that aren't, but I'll always go to physical media as the first port of call. Yeah, so Video Nasties was like my main introduction to horror films. And when I think of the Video Nasties that I've seen, and there are quite a few of them, I've looked up the list on the internet prior to recording this video, and I was surprised how many there were. I only remember a little handful of them. And the ones I remember are the first Evil Dead, which I said in my previous horror-related video is fantastic, and it's definitely my favourite Evil Dead movie. And that was a Video Nasty. And I can remember watching that on video and thinking it was scary, but again, enjoying it for what it was, for the sort of horror movie that it was. So that was one of my Video Nasties. Another one was a film called Night of the Demon, which I think was about a big Bigfoot sort of Sasquatch that terrorized some young people that were in a log cabin. So some similarities to The Evil Dead, except it was Bigfoot rather than an evil entity. And there's a famous scene in that always stuck in my mind. Interestingly, the other two video nasties I'm going to mention all have scenes involving tadgers. If you don't know what that slang is, it's penis. They all have something to do with men's penises. So in Night of the Demon, there's a scene where a chap gets his tadger out to urinate in some bushes. And unbeknownst to him, Sasquatch is hiding in the bushes and he reaches out and pulls his old chap off. And by that I mean he actually rips it off. So he bleeds out.
Oh! It was my dick. Oh, lifted up by it. Hot sauce.
Yeah, whose decision was it to use hot sauce for blood in this film? Sriracha. Oh my God. Oh. Oh no.
I always remember that scene for some reason. And then the other video nasty I remember is I Spit on Your Grave, which is kind of a reverse death wish with a woman that gets gang raped and she goes about systematically killing the people that attacked her. And there's a sequence in that where she chops a man's old chap off while he's in the bath that I remember is quite nasty. Interestingly, my mother was always a fan of that film as well. I don't know why. And then Driller Killer. I remember Driller Killer, and the cover for that was particularly gruesome. I think that was the main reason that people wanted that off the shelves, that were that way inclined. So yeah, that's my kind of little dipping the toe in the video nasties waters. And that got me interested in horror films. Not to a massive degree. As I say, I have some horror films in my collection, but not a massive amount. So what I thought I would do is just go through my favourite horror films that I have in my physical media collection and show you some clips of them. And then I just have a couple of more modern horror films that I want to show you that people may think, oh, what have you got those for? But I kind of like them. So I know my camera's not great at focusing in on things I hold up. It tends to focus on my face. So I'll put the covers up as a separate image while I'm doing this. So the first movie that I want to talk about that I own on Blu-ray is The Exorcist. William Friedkin's The Exorcist. What can you say about The Exorcist that's not already been said? It's a monumental shift in horror films when this was released. I always think in terms of how movies forwarded the genre that they're in. There are key ones, and I'm going to be talking about another one that I've got in the pile down here. But this was one of them. Horror movies changed after this first Exorcist was released. It relies on physical effects in a supreme way. And I think how they filmed this and achieved some of the effects with the young Linda Blair when she's in the full throes of being possessed is just incredible. And the musical score is Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. And that's like, wah! It's like the cherry on top of a lovely, spongy, creamy cake. It's fantastic. So I've never seen this at the cinema. I've never seen this on the big screen, but I could imagine it was a knockout when it first came out. So yeah, a good Halloween film. Definitely recommend The Exorcist. The next one I have is George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. This is the 4K box set. And the 4K box set comes with 3 different cuts. And interestingly, I always go with the longest cut, which is called the Extended Cans Cut, I think it is. And I just love this movie so much that I thought, well, I want to watch the cut that's got the most footage in it. So that's the one I always go with. And I'm going to sound like a complete maniac when I say this, but as a horror film, I find this like a feel-good movie. Isn't that weird? And by that, I mean, the basic premise is these few people that are surviving a zombie apocalypse, they set up base in a mall, in a large shopping mall. So they kind of got everything they need close at hand, clothes, food, weapons. And it's just a brilliant, brilliant idea for a movie, for a horror movie, where they're trying to fend off a load of zombies. So they lock themselves in this shopping mall. And it's how they turn that around to their advantage. And I just find it so much fun. And there is some graphical violence in it. Tom Savini doing his best with makeup effects. But it's not as bad as the next zombie movie that George A. Romero did, which was Day of the Dead in 1985. I think this is 1978. That really did up the gore factor. But yeah, I love Dawn of the Dead, and it's a really good, fun movie. And again, I'm probably slightly bonkers, but when I do have down days, if I want to watch kind of a pick-me-up movie that's not a comedy, Dawn of the Dead. How bizarre is that? But that's the effect it has on me. I just think it's a fun ride. So great film, and a good Halloween film, a good sort of film to watch with a group of people on Halloween night. So how can you talk about horror movies and not bring up the very first Halloween by John Carpenter? Now, as I said, The Exorcist was a monumental shift in horror movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre definitely was, and I have that on Blu-ray. In fact, I should have got it out for this video, thinking about it. Is it close at hand? Maybe I can just rip it off the... Yeah, here it is. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Great film, toe pooper. It's aged incredibly well. It's still a creepy watch. But I want to talk about Halloween quickly. John Carpenter's was this 1978 or 1979? I can never remember the exact year. I can't see it in this light. It's one of the two. And this spawned a whole new different genre of horror film. Michael Myers. Fantastic. A lot of young people will probably watch this movie now and think it's incredibly boring and stale. And it's almost like a TV movie, because the pace of it is very different to what we're used to now. But I kind of love it for that. I like the fact that it's slower and there's no real graphical violence in it. It's the atmosphere. That's what matters with Halloween. And it does that incredibly well. And I've always been a big fan of it. In terms of the other Halloween movies that I have, I don't have Halloween 2. I have seen Halloween 2, but I wasn't a big fan of it. I have Halloween 3 Season of the Witch here. So that's the other Halloween Blu-ray that I have. And in terms of the later Halloween movies, I'm going to bring those up a little bit later on in this video, so bear with me. So yeah, Halloween 3, both fantastic. I mean, they're called Halloween, so of course they're going to be great films to watch on Halloween night. But great recommendations. And after Halloween was released, there was an American film producer called Sean Cunningham, I think his name is. And he thought, oh, that's a great idea for a movie. We should have a go at doing something similar. So he came up with the Friday the 13th franchise with Jason Voorhees. And I love Michael Myers and I love Jason Voorhees, and it'd be very difficult to pick between them which I preferred. But this is the Friday the 13th 8 movie collection. So this doesn't have part 9 or part 10. This only goes up to Jason Takes Manhattan. And these are all cracking. It's interesting that the very first Friday the 13th movie, the killer is Jason Voorhees' mother. And it catches a lot of people out in pub quizzes. If the question is who is the killer in Friday the 13th, everybody goes, Jason Voorhees. No, it's the mother. But I really like these. And my favourite Friday the 13th movie is part 6, which is the one which starts with him being electrocuted in his grave in like a Frankenstein manner, and it brings him back to life. I think that's a really good horror film with some very funny deaths in it. I think that's my favourite. But yeah, I'd recommend them. They're worth a watch. And then we have the Evil Dead trilogy, all directed by Sam Raimi. As I say, the first Evil Dead is, in my mind, seminal. It's so after The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the first Halloween movie, the next big shift in horror films was the first Evil Dead, in my opinion. And then we had Evil Dead 2, which came out about 4 or 5 years later, I want to say, which is a fantastic movie. It definitely upped the comedy ante, but it's no worse a movie for it. I can remember renting that out for the first time when it came out on video and just falling in love with it, and probably watched it like 4 times in a row on the night that I had it. And then we had Army of Darkness, which was a full-on horror action comedy. And interestingly, I was having a discussion with someone about horror films and Halloween a couple of years ago. And they happened to say to me, what movie would you watch on Halloween night? And I said, well, if I was with a group of people and it was kind of the end of a Halloween party, I would watch Army of Darkness without a doubt, because there's no greater horror movie that to have a fun time with a group of people than Army of Darkness. It's just hilarious. And if I was on my own, tricky, probably The Exorcist, I would say, would be my best Halloween night movie. But yeah, the Evil Dead trilogy, must have. And then the next big horror icon of the 80s, after Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, is of course Freddy Krueger. So, of course, I had to get the Nightmare on Elm Street box set. I had the DVD version of this back in the day, and that came with the 3D glasses for, was it part 5 or part 6 that had the 3D section at the end? I can't remember. It was one of those two. Unfortunately, the Blu-ray version doesn't. It doesn't have the 3D glasses, which is not really a big deal because, let's face it, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, up to part 4, the first one was brilliant. The second one, I quite like the second one, Freddy's Revenge. Part 3 was the one with the kids where they're in like a dream clinic. That was a fun watch for the first few times, but that's not aged very well. And then part 4 was the last decent one that was directed by Rennie Harlin. So it is a bit of a mixed bag, the Nightmare on Elm Street series. If you're new to them and you don't fancy watching them all, I would probably say just watch the first 2 and see how you get on with those. So yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, in terms of, excuse me for bending down, in terms of more modern horror movies, I have the Conjuring movies behind me. I really liked those. I like Vera Farmiga. I think she's really cute and she plays a lovely character in that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those. And in terms of other, as I say, I don't have many horror films, so I'm sorry to not show you that many, but I'm more of a science fiction action guy. But I am a very big fan. I've just knocked the camera. I am a very big fan, and I know a lot of people aren't, of the latest Halloween trilogy that was directed by David Gordon Green, which is, these probably won't show on camera, but Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. I think they were really good. These are very clever because they omit all of the previous Halloween sequels. So the first movie of this new trilogy follows on directly from the original Halloween, where Laurie Strode is kind of a recluse and she's encamped herself in this house in the middle of the woods with all kinds of booby traps, and she has all this firepower at hand. And it's very clear that the interaction she had with Michael Myers 40 odd years ago changed her, who she was as a person. And it was a very clever springboard for the new trilogy. Halloween Kills, a lot of people hated it. All the critics didn't like Halloween Kills, whereas I thought it was really funny. And the amount of people he kills in that film is unbelievable. And some of the deaths in it are really gruesome as well. And the latest one, Halloween Ends, was really slated when it was released. And I found that totally bizarre why that would be. And the reason people hated it was because Michael Myers isn't really in it. The story focuses on a different character and how he's kind of setting himself up to become the new Michael Myers. And then there's sort of a final confrontation between the real Michael Myers and Laurie Strode at the end that feels a little bit tacked on. But I really like Halloween Ends. I think it tried to do something different and it did it very well. So to the people that say, oh, you know, Michael Myers isn't really in it and he doesn't really kill anybody, well, watch the first two. Watch Halloween Kills. The amount of people he kills in that is insane. So yeah, I really like those as a trilogy. And I'm glad I've got them on 4K. In fact, thinking about it, I might watch Halloween Ends on Halloween night tonight because it's the one I've seen the least amount of times because it's the newest one. And then the last two horror movies I just wanted to quickly mention were parts 1 and 2 of the new It movie that was directed by Andy Muschietti. I've got Stephen King's original It book. I bought it when it first came out back in 1986. So I've actually got like a first edition hardback of it. And I remember reading it as a teenager. And it took me quite a while because it's a huge book. But I really loved it. And I remember when I read the book that I always liked the part of the story where they were children, because it would alternate between them being children to being adults. And it's interesting that this is now the second attempt we've had at it being turned into a movie, with the first one being the TV movie from 1990 with Tim Curry. And that was a two-parter. And the first part of that was really good, where they were kids. The second part, where they were adults, wasn't so good. And it's a similar setup with the new movies, but part 2 is better. It does redeem itself. Part 1, It Chapter 1, is still the better of the two, but the second one isn't a huge letdown. It's a good horror film, and it has Jessica Chastain in it, so that's another good reason to watch it, because she's gorgeous. So yeah, that's kind of my horror movie selection, and I've recommended a few that I would watch for Halloween if you're looking for something to see. So I hope you enjoyed that. I don't think I've missed anything out. I've covered pretty much what I wanted to say in terms of Halloween and horror movies. So I hope you all had a great Halloween. And if you live in England, the next thing we've got to look forward to is Bonfire Night, which I always really enjoy. Guy Fawkes Night. For those of you that aren't familiar with this and you're not from the United Kingdom, we celebrate the gunpowder plot that happened in the 17th century, where a group of people got together and they intended to blow up the Houses of Parliament and everybody in it. And of course, that's such a horrific thing to think about, never mind to plan and actually do, that British people celebrate it every year. Well, I think they're celebrating the fact that the plot was scuppered. That's why we tend to have a guy sitting on top of a bonfire, which is like an effigy of Guy Fawkes, and we burn it. But I just enjoy it for the fireworks. And what I don't enjoy about it is the fact that it's yet another reminder that Christmas is getting nearer. But we'll deal with that when the time comes. Perhaps I'll have to do an alternative Christmas message as my Christmas video and see what horrors I come up with for that. So, thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that ramble, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.